The Israeli military says it is closing in on the home of a top Hamas commander. They say the suspected mastermind of the October 7th attacks could be somewhere around Khan Yunis. Now, IDF forces say their troops have killed Hamas terrorists and struck dozens of terror targets in that area just during the past day. Our Ines de la Cuetara is in Tel Aviv with the latest. So, Ines, let's just talk about where exactly this Hamas commander is and what's the plans on behalf of the IDF. Hey guys, yeah, so that's the big question here. We don't know where he is. We do know that the IDF is pressing on in southern Gaza, that they are now in the heart of Khan Yunis, and that they are specifically encircling the home of Yahya Sinwar, who is the top Hamas leader in Gaza. He doesn't appear to be home, and it's unclear just where he is, but the IDF clearly going after him. We have seen them ramping up their operations in southern Gaza. They are also engaging in intense fighting in the north of Gaza. There was intense shelling there throughout the day today. We were actually speaking to soldiers near the border of Gaza today who have specifically been going in and out of northern Gaza. There was kind of the relentless sound of artillery, outgoing artillery there throughout the day. And soldiers we spoke to talked to us about just how intense the fighting was there and how they think it's because of the temporary truce and how that essentially gave Hamas a chance to regroup. They said that they understood that that was going to be a setback. They say it was worth it because it got hostages out, it got humanitarian aid in, but they say they're very much feeling that on the ground, that Hamas had a chance to kind of collect itself and come back stronger. And so that's why you're seeing so much fighting up north as well. And in fact, the IDF today confirming that at least one IDF soldier was killed. This is a 24-year-old who was killed in the north of Gaza, guys. All right, so the fighting intensifies, as does essentially the propaganda war and the difficulty in sorting out facts here since the atrocities of October 7th. There were allegations of atrocities that turned out not to be true, beheaded babies, that kind of thing. And now there's a debate about reports that hostages were sexually abused while they were in Hamas captivity, and others who are still there may yet be. The White House calls those reports, quote, believable. How is this being supported in Israel, and what do you make of that, of the White House backing them up? Yeah, so concerns about sexual violence and rape when it comes to the hostages, but also when it comes to some of the victims of October 7th. And we are starting to hear of truly horrifying reports of bodies mutilated, of eyewitness reports of people who were there specifically at the Nova Music Festival who heard stories, who heard gang rape for themselves, and just really horrific stories coming out. I think this is a story that's been largely ignored, and so that has drawn strong condemnation from Israel, from the leadership here, the Israeli Prime Minister coming out with harsh statements, the UN facing a lot of heat for not mentioning this for essentially 8 weeks. We are starting to hear more and more of these accounts, again, eyewitness accounts, and the IDF also releasing video, which they say is of Hamas fighters being interrogated and talking about how fighters were essentially encouraged to carry out this sexual violence. So, meanwhile, let's talk about just the fighting that hasn't stopped. It's intensified. What do we know about aid getting in to those that need it, and also the process of evacuation? Yeah, so aid very much necessary here. The situation in Gaza is dire as ever, possibly more dire than it's been, especially with winter just around the corner. We are learning, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, that in just the last 24 hours, there were 350 people who were killed. Doctors Without Borders is talking about how they today saw more people who were dead brought to hospitals than people who were wounded. That's the first time that's happened. And the death toll in Gaza climbing to over 17,000 killed, again, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Concerns about people going hungry as well. So we're starting to see really remarkable images of huge crowds gathering at aid distribution points. The fighting, of course, complicating that distribution. So, more and more calls for more aid to be allowed in. I will say 100 trucks were allowed in yesterday. So that aid's still steadily going in, but it's still just a drop in the ocean in terms of what's needed. All right, Ines de la Cuetara there in Tel Aviv. Thanks as always. Appreciate it.